There's a rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that looks like a knife blade stabbed into the water. It rises 1,844 feet straight up from the ocean floor. No beaches, no trees, just sheer vertical cliffs. For over 200 years, scientists assumed nothing could survive there. Then, in 2001, a team climbed this death trap in the middle of the night and found something impossible: 24 insects. The last 24 of their species on Earth, hiding under a single bush. This is Ball's Pyramid. And what happened here is one of the greatest survival stories in history: the discovery. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're clinging to a volcanic rock in the middle of the ocean. Waves are smashing against the cliffs below. One wrong move and you're dead. But you keep climbing because you're searching for an insect that's been extinct for 80 years. An insect the size of your hand that scientists call a tree lobster. And then you see it. Movement, under a scraggly bush barely clinging to life on this barren cliff face. You shine your flashlight and there they are. Massive stick insects, black, shiny, very much alive. 24 individuals. That's it. The rarest insect on Earth, surviving on the most inhospitable island imaginable. But how did they get here? To understand that, we need to go back to 1788. Ball's Pyramid. Ball's Pyramid was discovered by Lieutenant Henry Lidgebird Ball in 1788. He was sailing from Sydney when he spotted something impossible. A massive blade of rock jutting from the ocean. It looked like a pyramid, but it was natural. A remnant of a volcano that erupted 7 million years ago. Ball's Pyramid is the tallest volcanic sea stack in the world, 1,844 feet tall, but only 1,100 feet long and 300 feet wide. Imagine the Eiffel Tower, but it's a natural rock in the middle of the ocean. It's so steep that when you look at it, your brain can't process it. It looks fake. For nearly 200 years, nobody climbed it. It's 14 miles from the nearest land, Lord Howe Island, surrounded by shark-infested waters with killer currents. The cliffs are vertical. There's nowhere to land safely. The first successful climb didn't happen until 1965. Climbers described it as a suicide mission. The Lord Howe Island stick insect. Let's rewind to 1918. On nearby Lord Howe Island lived an insect unlike anything else on Earth. The Lord Howe Island stick insect. Locals called it the tree lobster because it's massive, 6 inches long, thick as your thumb, covered in a hard black exoskeleton. These things looked like lobsters with legs. They were everywhere, thousands of them. Then, disaster struck. In 1918, a ship called the SS Macombo ran aground on Lord Howe Island. Black rats escaped. For rats, these insects were an all-you-can-eat buffet. The stick insects were big, slow, flightless, with no defenses. They'd evolved with no predators. Within 2 years, the rats had eaten every single one. By 1920, the Lord Howe Island stick insect was gone. The last confirmed sighting was 1920. Scientists officially declared them extinct in 1960, except they weren't extinct, not quite, the rumors. In the 1960s, rock climbers who scaled Ball's Pyramid found dead stick insects on the rocks, freshly dead. Not fossils, recent corpses. But how? These insects can't fly, they can't swim. And Ball's Pyramid is a barren rock. Even if they got there, what would they eat? Most scientists dismissed it, but a few couldn't let it go. What if a population had survived? What if the rarest insect on Earth was clinging to life on the most hostile island in the Pacific? In 2001, 2 Australian scientists decided to find out. David Priddle and Nicholas Carlisle planned an expedition. They'd search at night when the insects would be active. But Ball's Pyramid is protected. They needed special government permission, and the climb would be insanely dangerous. Sheer cliffs, loose rock, no rescue, at night, over the ocean. But they went anyway. The night climb, February 2001. The team arrived just before sunset. They stared up at the cliffs. From sea level, Ball's Pyramid looks impossible, but they'd identified patches of vegetation about 100 meters up. If any insects survived, they'd be there. They waited for darkness. Stick insects are nocturnal. They began climbing in total darkness using headlamps. Every handhold was a gamble. One loose rock and they'd plummet into the ocean. They reached the first vegetation patch. Nothing. They kept climbing, higher. The wind was brutal. The rock was slick. And then, at about 100 feet above the crashing waves, they found it, a single bush, the only plant in sight, clinging to a tiny ledge, and under that bush, in a patch of ground no bigger than a parking space, were the insects. 24 Lord Howe Island stick insects. Alive. The last wild population on Earth, the impossible survivors. Let's talk about how insane this is. First, how did they get to Ball's Pyramid? They can't fly or swim. The theory is that after the rats arrived in 1918, a few insects clung to driftwood and drifted 14 miles across the ocean. The odds are astronomical, but it must have happened. Second, what are they eating? Ball's Pyramid is barren. The entire population was surviving on one bush. If that bush died, the species died with it. Third, genetic studies later showed the population went through an extreme bottleneck. At some point, there were probably only a handful of individuals, maybe even just one pregnant female. They should have died from inbreeding, but somehow they didn't. 24 individuals, the entire wild population, living on the most hostile rock in the Pacific. And then the scientists made a controversial decision: the rescue mission. The team knew they couldn't leave them there. One storm and the species would be extinct forever. They needed a captive breeding program, but the Australian government was terrified. What if the stress killed them? What if they couldn't breed in captivity? It took 2 years of debate. Finally, in 2003, they agreed. The team could collect 4 insects, 2 breeding pairs. They'd bring them to Melbourne Zoo and attempt to breed them. The team returned to Ball's Pyramid, but when they arrived, disaster. There'd been a rock slide. The ledge was partially destroyed. They thought the population was gone, but the insects had survived, clustered under what remained of the bush. They carefully collected 2 pairs, named them Adam, Eve, and Patrick. They began the dangerous descent with the rarest insects on Earth. They made it. The insects arrived at Melbourne Zoo, and then something incredible happened. The breeding success. Patrick and his mate started breeding. Stick insects lay lots of eggs, and these 2 went crazy. Within months, they had hundreds of offspring. The zoo staff couldn't believe it. They'd expected maybe a few babies. Instead, Patrick became the father of thousands. By 2008, the captive population had exploded to over 700 adults with more than 11,000 eggs. The species was saved. Scientists had pulled off one of the greatest conservation rescues in history. But here's where it gets complicated. The goal was to return them to Lord Howe Island, but the rats are still there. If they release stick insects while rats are around, it's extinction all over again. So the plan: eradicate the rats first, then reintroduce the stick insects. Except some Lord Howe Island residents aren't thrilled about sharing their island with giant 6-inch insects. The project is ongoing. The stick insects are still in captivity, waiting for their home to be safe again. Ball's Pyramid is still there, still standing, still the tallest sea stack on Earth. And those 24 insects? They're still clinging to that single bush, 100 feet above the ocean, surviving against impossible odds. This story is a reminder that life is ridiculously resilient. These insects survived rat invasions, 14 miles of open ocean, 80 years of assumed extinction, and life on a barren rock with almost no food. They shouldn't exist, but they do. Ball's Pyramid looks like a knife stabbed into the ocean. It's hostile, barren, and impossible, but it saved a species. It became a lifeboat for the world's rarest insect. And in 2001, when scientists climbed that rock in the middle of the night, they found something science had written off as lost forever. The Lord Howe Island stick insect, the tree lobster, went from 24 individuals on a death trap island to thousands thriving in captivity. All because a few scientists refused to believe extinction was the end of the story. They climbed an impossible rock at 2 a.m. and found hope clinging to a single bush. Sometimes the most impossible places hold the most incredible secrets. Ball's Pyramid is one of them. A knife blade in the ocean, a death trap, a sanctuary. The last refuge of creatures that refuse to die. And a reminder that as long as there's life, there's a chance. The rarest insect on Earth is still here, still fighting, still surviving. All thanks to an impossible island and the scientists who refuse to give up.